One of the great treasures we have as a human race is the fact that we are storytellers. We are people of the oral existence, right? We speak existence to one another. I absolutely love the fact that as we're born and we begin to grow up, it's not writing, it's our ability to communicate with our words. And so stories begin to develop over time, and one of the great gifts we have as a human race are the stories of those who came before us. Today we have one of those amazing stories that is meant to inspire us, meant to show us a bit about who we are and about who God is and how He works in our life. It's a very spectacular story about Jonah. Now, Jonah is pretty amazing because it is embraced by so much of the world. There are a few stories out of the far Near East, the ancient far Near East, that seem to have enraptured the entire globe, and every culture has one form or another of the story. One of that is Noah and the flood. That's just about uniform throughout all the cultures where you hear about this flood and Noah and everything that happened through there. A second now is Jonah. Jonah is a universal story that seems to hit home with every culture around the world. From the minute it was penned, from the minute the stories were coming, this story seems to kind of suck us in, kind of draw in a little bit about what's happening in the world around us. This wonderful story of Jonah. And we talked about this, a month or two ago, about how important stories are for us. If a writer does this job right, I remember the old books growing up, the Mother Goose, this little, what are they called, the golden books, the Mother Gooses that I would read, and the Brothers Grimm. I showed a little while back these tales, and oftentimes with children back in the day, they would be tales that were really scary. When the bough breaks, the cradle falls and smashes. There's some pretty vivid stories that they told kids. And you wonder, would we allow that today? I don't know. But the purpose of these stories was so that you, as a child, could feel that emotion. You could feel fear. You could feel anger. You could feel confusion. You could feel sort of what I do in that situation, to truly feel the emotion in a protected environment, so that someday, when you face that fear, you might go, oh, yeah, I think I know how I want to do this, or maybe I could do it a little better. Well, Jonah is one of those stories. And one of the ways we know this about Jonah is the fact that we know nothing about Jonah at all. Nothing. If he had any kind of significant impact on the Hebrew tradition, he would have some biography. They would explain a little more about who he is, where he's from. You'd have a little bit of genealogy on Jonah a bit, but we don't have that at all with Jonah. And so Jonah was written, the story about Jonah was written in a way that it was an everyman and every woman that we're talking about. He was an average Joe. No. Yeah, that didn't work either earlier. That's okay. He was an average Joe. He's just us. And so the teller of Jonah's story wanted to make sure that you put yourself in that position. There was nothing remarkable about Jonah. He was just an everyday, ordinary person. And so as we read through Jonah over the next 5 weeks, it's important for us, because the original storyteller wanted this, for you to put yourself in his place. Think about what you would be feeling. Think about what you would do in these situations. And so we're going to slow down and take a little time and put us in that environment so we can feel, so that we can think through this. Because there are themes here that go through every culture around the world and are told in every culture around the world. And we're going to have a lot of fun with that. We really are. Starts off with a lot, just the first 2 verses. The word of the Lord came to Jonah from the Lord. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. This is usually the precursor to destruction. So God is about to lay his judgment upon this city and destroy it, to bring about destruction to this entire situation. And so the Lord came to this average, ordinary person, go to Nineveh and preach. This is interesting because Jonah is set around 760 BC, and this was a politically, I would say, prosperous time for the people of Israel. The kingdom has split up. Instead of having one set ruler and one group of tribes, you have the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom for this story of Jonah. And the northern kingdom, where this is all happening, is prospering right now. Jeroboam II is ruling, and one of the reasons why it is prospering is Nineveh, that's up in Assyria, and Joppa, which is one of the cities we'll talk about today, back into the north of Israel. Assyria was busy with its northern border. They were busy elsewhere. They really hadn't turned their attention to the south yet. They were shoring up their borders on the north because in less than 38 years, they were about to attack Israel and destroy the northern kingdom completely. Matter of fact, to this very day, the northern kingdom is gone. It's just gone. But at this point, they were worried about their borders to the north. I assume because they were ready to come south. Now, Assyria was a stronghold of people who did not care about Hebrew people. And they were just sitting there to the north. And God had called Jonah to go to Nineveh, right at the heart of Assyria, and to preach, to speak his word. This is kind of an interesting thing for him to do. I don't know. What would this be like? It would be like saying to us, I want you to go to an Iranian city, just you, and I want you to go to the middle of one of the biggest cities there, and I want you to declare that they need to change their ways and that the judgment of God was coming. If this were you, what are you thinking? Sorry, one more time, Lord. Yeah, this is a big ask. But God was going to deal with a corrupt culture. This culture in Assyria, in Nineveh, which represented the people, was corrupted. This is what makes it sort of universal, the first part anyway. All human societies have ended in corruption, every single one. Every human, let me say that again, every human society on the planet that's ever been formed before us has ended in corruption. We just happen to be in one of those emerging societies that have been birthed out of the last one. Now, where are we on that arc in our society? In order to explain what a corrupt culture is, why don't I do this? Let's just briefly talk about what builds society. What builds culture, what builds society, is sacrifice. God says that all the time. It's not a grappling for power, it's sacrifice. It's coming out of ourselves. It's caring for one another around us. It's saving a little bit and giving to others around us, trading our gifts with one another, coming together, caring for someone else as much as yourself. It's that sacrifice. It's that caring. It's that grace that comes out of us. And when we do that for people, there's a trust that develops. And so you can say, well, I trust my neighbor won't mow on my side of the fence line. I trust that you won't run the red light. I trust that you will generally try and do the right thing. And so this group of people then get together because they sacrifice for one another and they begin to trust one another. And then usually they are brought together by mutual purpose. Think about the United States of America. Why did this country even form? What's its heart? What do we all agree to? Why are we part of this country? Why are we a citizen? We've generally agreed to a mutual purpose. And then we act, hopefully, out of goodwill toward one another to try and keep that purpose going and last. So when a culture becomes corrupt, it's just the opposite of this. We only think about ourselves. Just do what feels right to you. Don't worry about the cost to the person around you. Don't worry about the cost to your future. Just do what's good for you right now. Whatever you feel, whatever your whims are, just go do it. Don't worry about it. Do it. Don't worry about anyone around you. It's about you. You do what's right for you, whatever feels right. You have this mentality of narcissism that focuses back to ourselves and brings us in from sacrifice to just, turning into our own willpower. And we begin to exploit the people around us. We begin to hurt those. We get rid of civil discourse. We can't speak to one another anymore. We can't say what we mean because we don't trust anyone anymore. We lose that identity, and goodwill seems to go away, and that's where societies begin to crumble down to the bottom. Now, we catch Nineveh on the downswing of this. It's gone, and God has noticed this, and it's time for something else to happen. God explains this multiple times. And then Peter is summarizing it up in 1 Peter here. They stumble because they do not obey God's word, and so they meet the fate that was planned for them. When we no longer align ourselves with the creator of the world who set the rules in place, then the consequences of that are death. Consequences of that is destruction. God does not want that for us. He wants us to do well. He wants us to thrive. And oftentimes he sends a messenger, a word, to say, hey, this is what's right. This is what you need to do so that you can recover, so that you can be renewed. So God sends his chosen people, those who know his word, to go out and bring light into the darkness. This is the truth. This is the light, if we would just follow Jesus there. So in this case, Jonah was picked, right? You don't save a corrupt culture by just joining it and agreeing with it. You have to go counter. You have to speak about what's going on. You have to say what God has given you. And so he's going to send Jonah. But Jonah squarely has the attitude, it's not my problem. They are not my problem. But Jonah got up and went in the opposite direction to get away from the Lord. He went down to the port of Joppa, where he found a ship leaving for Tarshish. He brought a ticket and went on board, hoping to escape from the Lord by sailing to Tarshish. This is not my problem, says Jonah. Now, remember what I said. Think about you go into an Iranian city right now and doing that. Just out of the blue, God breaks through and says, go do this. It's not my problem. I have a job, I have a house, I've got family, I've got all these. You quickly start to come up with reasons to ignore the call, ignore the word, ignore the duty that God has brought to you. And so not only is it a universal story that all societies go corrupt, and I'm not some old man yelling at the clouds. I mean, I see that around me too, right? I mean, we see this breakdown. So everyone does around the world. Also, we are not the first to receive a message from God or be given purpose from God to go live out our life. This is a purpose-driven story. This is about a message. This is about meaning. But in the end, I guess in the middle, at the beginning, Jonah had some good objections, right? The Assyrians are the historical enemy of my people. Let them rot. They know they were supposed to follow God. Let them collapse on themselves. I will relax on the porch and watch them fall. They are our enemies. They've hurt us. They don't want best for us. Let them die. Whatever you think, I think that's a reasonable objection. That's not my problem, right? They haven't followed God's teachings. Another way, Nineveh was 120,000, 150,000 people strong. That is huge for a nation city with infrastructure. It's like us going to New York City, just one, and standing in the middle of town going, repent, God's judgment is at hand. This is a huge city. It's just me, and I'm just me. I'm just John. I'm not trained in all this. You want me to go there and just stand there and say that? That's absurd. So another reasonable objection from Jonah. And I'm sorry, but why should I do anything about it anyways? Just let them die. I'm not going up there. I'm not doing that. See, this makes it universal because whether you know it or not, you are making these decisions every day. People don't always treat you well. Companies don't always reward you the way they should. People around you can be very awful to you, and you have to make a decision every day. Am I still going to help these people? Am I still going to do the right thing because they don't deserve it? We make this decision every day whether to do something even though the people around us are not always the best or may even be evil. Are we going to do this ourselves? Every single day we make this decision Jonah is trying to make. Are we going to do the good in spite of the bad around us? Are we going to do it? I mean, I've seen how some of us drive, the road rage, just driving around. And so Jonah's having to deal with this. I don't want to really help these people. This is at a great cost to me, and I'm not going to. I'm going to take the high ground, says Jonah. I'm going to take the high ground and say no on moral objections. Okay, good luck with that. See, we're supposed to, as a people, trust the Lord and not lean on our own understanding of things. But when God says, this is wrong, this is what I need you to speak up about, your society is crumbling, speak, act. I've given you what you need. Trust in me, and I will make your path straight. It won't be easy. You may only have 2 fingers and 1 leg at the end, but it'll be the best outcome. I'm giving you what you need to thrive, to survive. Follow it. But Jonah says, no, thank you. I'm going to take the moral high ground here and do the right thing. I'm going to go the opposite direction and let the Ninevites die. You know how far away Tarshish is from where he was? Okay, what I decided to do is put a red rim around the known Roman world. See that? So the Roman Empire at its greatest peak someday would be that red rim all the way around there. Okay, that's the known universe to them. Because if you go any further, you fall off the flat earth, right? Because the earth is flat. So if you sail any further away, you fall off. And so if you look at this, look how far away he went. He went to the farthest point away from where he was. The farthest he could go to Tarshish. You see Nineveh right over there. It's just a little short jog up there. Went down to Joppa to escape. He wasn't just ignoring God, he was running from God. He knew who he was dealing with. Now, those of you who are older than me and maybe wiser, help me out here. Does running away from your problems solve anything? I'm a trifle deaf in this here. What was that? Does running away from your problems solve things? No, not at all, does it? Oftentimes makes it worse. You know? I know there's a festering wound in my arm. It'll heal itself eventually, right? And it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse over time. When we don't face the truth, when we don't deal with those acts of conscience in our life, things are about to get worse. Jonah decides to run, and guess what's about to happen? Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God, lowercase g, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. They are afraid. These are salty dogs. These are experienced sailors, and they are freaked out. This is not a normal thing that's happened. Why? Because Jonah, I know you're just an everyday, ordinary person. I know where we're listening, we're not pastors, we're not theological experts, but I am God, and this is now your duty. This is where your life is pointed, and I need you to live it out. And if you deny that or reject it, well, here comes the storm. The storm, this unknown chaos, a state of being where you don't know what to do. What's more, your problems are just as unique as you are, so if you don't face it, let's just ask Google. Maybe they'll solve my problems. No. The storm that God is brewing for you is just as unique as you are. You're going to have to turn and face these difficulties in your life. You're going to have to work with others who are good at what they do to help you work through them. And I'm not saying it's easy, but when we are faced with a truth that doesn't line up with ours, when we're faced with an ask or a word we have to speak that doesn't sit well with us, we're going to have to stop, turn inward, and get rid of those pieces of our life that just don't work anymore so that we can move forward. And the storm, unfortunately, is just part of human life. You will go through storms. I wish it was a different way with humanity. I hope it's only a day or a week, God forbid, a month or a year, these storms are in your life. But they are there so that you can get rid of those pieces that just don't line up with reality anymore and move forward. You know, these storms, they bother you, they bug you, they rub you, they torment you. They're irritating, they're daunting, and if you don't face or deal with them, you can become bitter. And I've been around many people as a pastor who have just become bitter. Bitter at life, bitter with their circumstances, bitter with where things are going, just bitter because they haven't made that connection with God in a way that they can move forward. And we don't want that for you. God doesn't want that for you. He wants you to live with confidence. He wants you to live that life. That plague of conscience is just a way for us to move into a certain direction. But Jonah was in complete denial, folks. Complete denial. I'd like to read through a little bit of this. I can't get it all on the screen, so I'll just read a little bit to you. They threw the junk off the ship to lighten the load, but Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell in a deep sleep. You want to talk about a person who's stubborn? Have you known stubborn people before? I mean, really stubborn people. They are right. No matter what happens, lightning could be striking behind them. You're talking, it doesn't matter. I'm right, you're wrong. Period. He is so confident in his moral high ground, he fell asleep on the boat. That's someone who believes in what they're doing, isn't it? Just fell asleep. All hell is breaking loose around him. The storm is collapsing on them. Everyone around him's freaking out. Like, what's happening here? So the captain went down to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us, and we will not perish." Then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let's cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity." This is where the long straw wins, or the colored rock wins out of the sack. They cast lots, and the Lord had a hand in this too. Guess whose lot they pull out? Jonah. So they go to Jonah and say, "Hey, tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What did you do? Where did you come from? What is your country? From what people are you? What's going on?" He answered, "I am a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land." Great. You are the All-Father, right? This is the God of everything, and you have made him mad. This terrified them, and they asked, "What have you done?" Because he already told them he was running away from the Lord. The sea was getting rougher and rougher. So they asked him, "What should we do to make the sea calm down for us?" Jonah said, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea, and it will be calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." Not me, you. Instead, the men did their best to row back to the land. If he is an emissary of the God who's really mad right now, yeah, I'm going to throw you off the boat. They're going to kill me for doing it. So they try their hardest to get to the side, to get through the storm, to row, but they just couldn't make it. Then they cried out to the Lord himself, "O Lord, please do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, O Lord, have done as you pleased." Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard. And the raging sea grew calm immediately. At this, the men gratefully feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. Okay, this is kind of like salt in the wound. Everywhere Jonah goes now, even if he brushes them on the shirt collar, they convert. Who's doing this work? Is this Jonah's great power? No. The Lord has sent him on a mission. Now, wherever he goes, whatever he touches, converts to the Lord. The storm is going crazy. They threw him overboard. This storm represents a lack of faith and trust in God, in particular the task that he has given him. This sounds a lot like another storm. Jesus was telling his disciples stories. Hey, this is stories to teach them, to get them into the mood so that when they face trouble, they would remember parable after parable after parable, and they weren't understanding. They were not listening. Jesus said to them, "Don't you understand the parable? How will you understand anything?" And so just right after that, he decides to take the boat across the lake. And a furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so it was nearly swamped. Does this sound familiar? You have this boat in the water, and everything is just going all to, it's just not going good, and everything's going crazy. And the more the disciples doubt, the more the storm rages. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. Does this sound familiar? Jonah, all high on his horse, believing he had the high moral ground. Jesus, sleeping because he believed he was the righteousness. He was the right way. And the disciples were doubting. They went to Jesus and said, "Hey, teacher, don't you care if we drowned?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Who calms the storms in our life? Who? Jesus calms those storms by faith. You have all this going around. You're going to have storms in your life. But unfortunately, as I end my sermon today, the storms sometimes aren't enough. It's about to get worse for Jonah. An unfortunate learning that I have come upon being a pastor is that if you think you're at rock bottom, you're not. There's always another level of hell for humanity. There's always another level, always another level, always another level. And so as a pastor, as therapists, you try and hold people at the level they're at so that they can work through and face so that they can start going the other way. But there's always another level, always another level. And something's about to swallow Jonah and take him down into the abyss. Because the storm obviously wasn't enough for him. And we're going to cover that next week. So I wish I had a happy landing for you. So you have to come back next week for that. One thing I will say as we finish up, Jesus promises us a life filled with meaning and adventure. Are you telling me Jonah is not on an adventure? Now, along the way, we are going to have to face challenges that force us to sacrifice something of ourselves. That's so that we can move forward, which also includes a lot of storms, folks. Storms are just part of the process. I wish it wasn't, but it is. See, this is where Jesus enters the picture. This is where he does his best work, is when we cry out, "I can't take it anymore. I didn't think I'd have to endure this." This is where Jesus does his best work for us, as we learn to lose ourselves and sink deeper into him. And we thank him for it. Amen.